Superintendent of the Kenyon Wanamingo Schools is with us today. We're going to talk about the upcoming referendum request. Good morning.
Good morning, Gordy. Happy to be here.
Yeah, well, I appreciate you coming by. It's kind of on the way to school, though, right?
Yeah, it worked out fine.
Sort of.
Yeah.
Anyway.
It's always nice to visit.
So how long have you been the superintendent there?
2.5 years, and I've been with the Kenyon Wanamingo district. It'll be 3 years in January. It's upcoming January.
Yeah, there's a tragedy when Dr. Evert passed away.
That was a sad day.
Yeah, he was a good guy, real good guy. I remember when I'd see him at games and stuff, he would say how he was looking so forward to retiring, you know, and he never got to do that.
He was looking forward to it, and I had the privilege of working with him for a few months as I was helping out at the high school before he tragically passed away, and that made all the difference in the world for me because I understood, a lot about what Kenyon Wanamingo area was about,
Sure.
And Jeff's style of leadership, and that really helped in the transition. Even though it was an unplanned transition, it was really helpful to have worked with him for a few months and get to know him.
That's right. You were the principal then.
Yeah, I was interim principal for a couple months, 3 months actually before he passed away.
And that probably helps too, as the superintendent.
Yeah, it did. Got to learn a lot in that period of time.
The superintendent doesn't always get a lot of time with kids, where a principal does.
I got to know a lot of the kids before that. Now with the district office being in elementary school, I get to be around elementary school kids, and I've never done that in over 25 years in public education. I had never worked in an elementary school, so now I eat lunch most days with the elementary school kids, and I go out in the hallway and hassle them a little bit, and we have fun. So.
Yeah, well, that's fantastic. Anyway, an important vote coming up on November 7th for residents of the Kenyon Wanamingo Public School District.
Absolutely. It's a great opportunity. There's some things coming together timing-wise that weren't in place even a year ago. So as we've been working for 3 years looking at our facilities, an initiative that we call Dream Like a Night, we went out to the community and just said, dream it up. Dream, what are the things you'd like to for this public school district to have moving toward the future? And it's okay to dream. It's okay to think about things like hockey rinks and indoor swimming pools and things like that probably weren't going to happen in a district our size, but we wanted people to dream.
Sure.
Ultimately, we knew at some point we'd transition from dreaming like a night to acting like a night. We just didn't know when, and so we watched very observantly and patiently as the legislature kind of passed on the ag to school legislation the previous summer. It got pocket vetoed at the governor's desk. It had bipartisan support, but there was just some other things going on that led to it sitting there. Right away, this last legislative session, they picked that back up, and the governor signed it. And so, of all the timing things that are coming together, I think the most important one is the ag to school credit that's in place now. So all of any current bonds that schools have for facilities will receive a 40% tax credit, and so will any future bonds. So it's like a 40% off sale, which gets people's attention. There's also some credit in there for commercial enterprises, for retail and industrial. It's kind of complicated. It sounds like for the most part they get $700 credit off their first $100,000 in value. But the nice thing about the change in the ag to school law and how ag land participates in school facilities bonds, and how industrial, commercial, and even how the residential property owners are impacted by any school bond. The best thing about it is they don't have to figure it out themselves. They can go to our school website and click on the referendum link, and they'll be able to put in their own property information and get an exact amount of what the impact will be, the tax impact will be for them. It's a little bit more complicated if you're running a business or you have ag land or you're in a bunch of different categories. And if you can't just simply run the calculator, we have our contact there for Ellers, which is our financial representative. They contact Ellers, and very promptly they get a response on exactly what their tax impact will be over the years. And so I think that's one of those helpful things that we didn't have in past years that's really handy right now.
Right. I got to get an opening market report, courtesy of your KDHL Agri Boosters, and we'll talk more about the vote November 7th in Kenyon Wanamingo.
Green Chris is our chief, and so is our grandpa.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to today's edition of AM Minnesota. Again, the superintendent of the Kenyon Wanamingo Public Schools, School District number 2172. Dr. Jeff Pesta is with us this morning, and maybe we should just dive in. There's 2 questions that'll be on the ballot November 7th, right?
Correct. It's kind of an interesting process. As this timing came together, having a good credit rating as a district, being in good financial position, doing some things strategically with our long-term facilities maintenance funding that comes from the state, like selling a bond at a really low rate of 2.01% to use that funding to take some of the important deferred maintenance things off the plate so that we could focus on some other things. So those things have been taken care of. We've refunded bonds and saved. We'll save over the next 7 years $600,000 on current bonds that we have out there, and those are also eligible for the tax credit immediately. So it's some good things going on. Overall property tax levy that'll be down 2.2% this year. So a lot of things going on that we talked about before the break about setting up the timing for looking at this now. So our school board really dug in. They realized that the timing was setting up so that this was an opportunity to actually put a facilities question out there to the public. It didn't hurt that we had to run our own special election because we have a 1-year school board seat that by statute needs to be filled by election. So we filled it by appointment. We had a director move out of the district. They're no longer eligible to hold that office. So we did it. The board did an appointment last year, which can only last a year or until your next election cycle. So we're hosting an election, and we have the ability for folks to vote in Kenyon or Wanamingo at the schools. So there's a cost involved. There's a lot of time and effort involved. When we knew that we were hosting that election, it seemed like perfect timing with all the other things aligning to at least ask the question. So let's roll up our sleeves and see what would the questions be. And our school board put in about 20 hours of meeting time this summer working through this process. I think the longest meeting was about 7 hours long. And they're not group thinkers. They all think individually and represent different constituencies, but they're really good about listening to each other and taking a break and coming back and looking at things from a different angle. And what they ended up with, which was kind of a surprise, was 2 non-contingent ballot questions. You don't see that very often. It's usually vote for this, and if you prove it, then we'll up the ante a little bit and try our luck with something a little bit more significant. So we had a group that was really, really motivated by investing in early childhood education and making sure that we have the best facilities, the best programming, the best opportunity in both communities, equally between Kenyon and Wanamingo. And so they wanted to make sure that if there's any ballot question, that improving those facilities was on there. And we had another group of board members that really believe that the activities, the athletics, the arts, and things like that are really what make small town districts unique and keeps the kids in school, keeps them from drifting off to post-secondary enrollment and other things like that, keeps them home and keeps them involved in all the things that make for a comprehensive education. So they really wanted to see us improve the facilities with things like a field house, improve the track and the football field, which really were in need of some attention and some improvement. And so they ended up coming up with 2 separate ballot questions that are non-contingent. One improves the facilities that we have in all kinds of ways, from plumbing and electric, which aren't that exciting, to redesigning spaces into indoor early childhood activity centers. So that's a pretty fun one. That's the $7.1 million ballot question. And then that's ballot question number 1. And the second non-contingent question is a $4.3 million question, and that adds space. That adds about 20,000 square feet of space at the secondary school in Kenyon, a new entrance, which would be secure, something we don't have right now, create a great curb appeal and great welcoming feel with some flexible space that students can use and visitors will enjoy, puts the entrance to the building right onto a new entrance into the parking lot, so people can come into the building immediately get dropped off and get into the building immediately and be greeted and sort out whether they're going into the school or whether they'd be going into the new part of the building. And then there'd be some classroom space added on at the Wanamingo site so that the current art and music space, which is in the old elementary school gymnasium part of the building, would be converted back to an indoor early childhood space in Wanamingo. So there'd be some additions to the footprints at both sites in that second ballot question. So people have a choice to look at those about improving facilities that we currently have, adding some things that the board would find really valuable, and they can take them one at a time, and we've got the tax impact broken down, one ballot question at a time, so they can look at them individually as well.
Now, I remember I went to one of your school board meetings, in late August, and I seem to recall at that meeting, and it was a very good presentation there. I can't remember, was Ehlers there?
Ehlers was there, yeah. Our financial managers, and Preston Early, who is a construction manager from R.A. Morton Construction. They, along with our architect, Von Peterson from TSP, they've all been working on a contingency basis, so we haven't paid them anything to help us do the planning. And it's been a great working relationship. That's why when we were interviewing firms to work with, we really based it on who the board felt they had the best relationship with. Did they have history of working with districts our size and a successful history? And so we've got a nice plan. And I think one of the good things about this, we were already holding an election, and we spent just a few $100s creating informational materials. Most of our information is on the website, which is work that somebody has to do, but it doesn't really cost us much of anything. So it's been a real frugal, perhaps characteristic of the area, a real frugal approach to getting the word out. Most of the communications we've had with people have been face-to-face. This is probably going to reach a wider audience than any of the meetings we've had before. So we really appreciate the opportunity to be on the airwaves today.
Yeah, just if you add these two questions together, it's just under 12 million, right?
It'd actually be $11 million total if both ballot questions were approved, because there's some efficiencies to running, concurrent operations with the crews and everything. Sometimes people say, yeah, we get all this timing about why this is a good time to do this, but maybe we should wait 7 years when our school taxes are going to drop down anyway because the current bonds expire from the last facilities improvement. And one of the responses that I would have to that is, if you wait 7 years, you basically miss a generation of kids who could be benefiting from this. And one of the cool things about the plan that we have in place right now, the degree of our planning, even though we haven't put a lot of money into it, we put a lot of time and effort into it. And so we're ready to go this June to put the projects into place. And virtually all the things that were proposed will be in progress this summer. And just the final portions at the secondary school would be finished up the following summer. There'd be no disruption to the school schedule. We don't have to start early or anything like that. It'd be they'd be working in the summer on the areas where kids are normally at, and during the school year they'd be working on new footprint that wouldn't impact school operations. So it's got immediate impact, and when people look at the tax impact, I think they'll see a lot of advantages to moving quickly on this. And so that's what the communication process is all about, is getting that information out to people. That's why we're calling it Act Like a Night, as we went from Dream Like a Night to Act Like a Night. All we're asking for the community is that they act like a night by getting informed and voting, and that's really important in a school district that has around 6,000 people living in 221 square miles. Is every vote really counts. There is no wasted vote. So whether people are for it or they have reservations about it, we still want them to vote. You don't really feel like you've heard the true will of the people if you have a small turnout, especially in an off-year election. So we're really encouraging people to get out and vote. Absentee balloting has been going on for a while already. That continues through November 6th. If anybody would like to do an absentee ballot, we'd really encourage them very quickly to contact the district office and get their application in, because as it gets closer to the deadline, it gets more difficult for them to get the application turned around. But it's a real simple process for people who are going to be out of town, or college students, or anybody that's just more convenient with their work schedule to get that in ahead of time.
Yeah, don't have to have an excuse anymore.
Nope. Linda Thorson, our admin support person at the district office, has been visiting with multiple people just about every day since the balloting started, the absentee balloting started, and she gets them through in a real prompt manner, and they have it taken care of already. So,
correct me if I'm wrong, but the Kenyon Wanamingo School District is very rural.
Very rural.
You have a very rural school district. So maybe you could explain to us. You talked about this tax impact. If I understand it right, and again, correct me if I'm wrong, there's a 40% discount for agricultural property.
Yes, it was effective last July already. So any of the bonds that we did we did some HVAC improvements and some other site improvements back in 2009, and so we're still carrying some bonds from that expire in 2025. So right away, this tax year payable 2017, they're already getting 40% off what was not the best deal in the world for agricultural landowners in the past. So that's really this is a significant change of events for that. So moving forward, they'd also have the 40% tax credit, and people sometimes wonder, well, how long does that last? If it's a 40% off sale, how long does the sale last? Right. And it is in perpetuity, meaning it's a state statute. It had bipartisan support, and there'd have to be a whole big initiative that got going sometime in the future, the legislature, where they'd be willing to turn around and take that away. So it's here to stay for as long as as long as any laws hold up on the books. This one's here to stay, and it's about time that we get some support out in rural Minnesota.
Well, I was just thinking, a lot of these have gone down. A lot of the building bond referendums in the past, especially in rural districts, because of the burden on ag properties. And that's why legislators looked at this and said, we need to do something here, because obviously those buildings are getting old in a lot of the primarily rural school districts.
If you have a giant industrial tax base, or you have a swelling suburban population where people will just sign off on these increased operating levies or referenda, then you can keep spending. But in the rural districts, when they were really hitting the ag landholders unfairly and unevenly, it made it really tough to pass any building. So they continue to put off deferred maintenance, and the problem would get worse. So this is a significant improvement for outstate Minnesota, long overdue, and something that you're going to see that facilities referendum anyway, those are going to turn around to be positive votes in a lot of communities that weren't in the past. Hayfield, for example, they ran an early facilities referendum. They had to, due to ongoing deferred maintenance and slightly declining enrollment because of the size of families and whatnot out in the rural areas, they ended up consolidating it to one school instead of a two-site school. But I think that the community recognized that they needed to do something if they weren't going to just get absorbed into the neighboring larger school districts. And so they passed, through various mechanisms, they passed over $20 million worth of facilities improvements earlier this fall, and that went through by a nice margin. So this ag credit makes all the difference in the world, and it should. I mean, it's going to help the rural schools provide facilities that can stand up to what some of the other schools do.
I love the way these questions are worded.
Our questions?
Well, your questions.
Yeah.
We went over faribaults last week. It's basically the same wording, because some
bond attorneys write them.
Write it, and it's read like, I mean, you read it and you can tell an attorney wrote it, because it's somewhat vague, yet they try to be all-encompassing. You know what I'm saying?
Well, the bond attorneys write them.
Yours is more specific than faribaults, I'll say that.
The bond attorneys write them so that they hold up. The last thing you want to do is have something get approved by the voters and find out it didn't have the correct legal wording. So the bond attorneys write those. The job of the superintendent and the school board and anybody else is to get out there and explain, what does that mean? So we've had the sample ballot out for a few months already for the public to look at, and we go around and say, this is what it means. This first ballot question is about deferred maintenance and improving things that we already have, but making them better. Even things like a track and a football field, we already have them, but the football field it doesn't have a level elevation anywhere on the entire field. It needs some revamping. And the track, as we talked about before the show started, we've been running on a dirt track for since the dawn of time, and still been sending athletes to the state track meet. But when you walk out there and look at it, you realize an all-weather track is probably pretty necessary. So those are all part of the first ballot question that are improvements, and so we're communicating that. The second ballot question is distinct, because then it adds something onto both of the school sites, something that we didn't have before, that will make us a viable school district for the next 15, 20 years or whatever, when when a future school board will get together and look again, hey, what's our next investment? Any property that anybody owns needs some investment at some time, or it loses value. And not only the properties, but also the communities lose some value if they have a school district that's not thriving.
As I was just saying, I think your question's more specific than the faribault question, for example, because you do include in there the construction of the football field, track and playground improvements, the completion of a parking lot, sidewalk, landscaping, and traffic flow improvements district-wide. Faribault isn't even that specific.
Well, I'm sure that, and I know you've had Todd Sesker and other people on the airs, and I'm sure they're out doing the same thing that I'm doing. And I've actually listened to some of the interviews. They're out there trying to break down that legal language so that it's understandable for the community.
But as you said, the legal people are trying to, cover your tails so that
we need them to do that too.
Everything has to be included in there, or somebody can say, hey, this wasn't in there and you're doing this, and that's not legal.
Exactly. I mean, you have to be very transparent that once the money is shifted over to the school district and collected as taxes, we need to spend it in the areas that we proposed we were going to spend it. It's not money to be used for a new idea or a new project or something else that popped up. And also, I think it's really important because school elections and school facilities, school finance is a very complicated thing. It's like taxes. I mean, it just can't be simple. It's very complicated. So there are a lot of operating levies that are out there which do pay for teacher salaries and turning on the lights and transportation and things like that. The facilities bonds are a completely different thing. Those are for brick and mortar type things. And so it's important for other communities. We aren't running an operating levy. We have a current operating levy that's in place that continues on until 2023. So this is strictly about improving the facilities that we use.
You guys are currently financially stable?
Yeah, we're in good shape, and that's one of the reasons we last year we went out and got a Moody's rating, so basically a credit rating for the district that had never been done before. So we really stabilized the district finances, put in some policies that made sure that we had to balance our budget and live within our means, something that's not all that common in school districts anymore. They spend the money and then go try to raise the money, and we're living within our budget. So we received an AA2 rating from Moody's last year, and we got re-rated again this year at the same rate, which is really difficult for an ag-dependent economy to do. So that's about as high as you can get. And then with the state support underlying rating, we're at an A1. So I mentioned before the show, we sold these facilities bonds for roofing projects. We get all our roofing done and taken care of all in one single project. We sold bonds for that and got a 2.01 rate on that, which is historically low. And so our board is really thinking short-term and long-term strategically and making some good financial moves, and it shows.
What's the payoff on these?
What's the payoff on them?
How many years does this?
They're 20. Both ballot questions are 20-year questions, and so the current bonds that we're holding expire in 2025. So all current debt will be gone in 2025, and it will be just these facilities bonds would be the only thing that is debt that's out there for the district. And probably should mention too, if you look at a $150,000 residential property in Kenyon or Wanamingo, which is actually a little above the median property value, so we're using the taxable value, not what people think they might be able to sell their home for. If you're looking at both ballot questions, the first ballot question for the improvements would add about $3 a month for 7 years onto their tax bill, and the second ballot question would add about $2 a month. So it's about $58 total per year for the next 7 years is what the addition for the average homeowner. So I know when I talk to people and they're anticipating, oh, my taxes are going to go through the roof, when they hear that, they're like, well, that sounds a little like a pretty practical investment. And we talked about 20 hours that our school board spent working on this. Their goal was to take this big grand plan of all the things we could do and work them down to a point where they thought this is just common sense investment in our properties, and they kind of set the cap at about 11 million and made sure they were the highest priority things that they could all agree on. They passed the motion 7-0 to support these two ballot questions, and that's the message that we're out there sharing with people, is how practical this investment is.
What are the hours of your?
It's going to be 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. People can vote at the Secondary school in Kenyon, it'll be in the middle school gym. So we'll have signs pointing people to that gym when they come in and park wherever they park. And then at the elementary school in Wanamingo, it'll be in the gym, the Ebert gym there will be set up and people will be able to walk. We'll have a greeter there and they'll walk in the door and go right into the gym and vote. And of course, absentee balloting goes up until the day before the actual election day.
How soon do you think they'll have the results?
We should have them that night because we're a smaller district. I'm anticipating we'll have them, and night could be early in the morning, but I'm anticipating we'll know by the next morning what's going to happen. So we've got optical scanners, so nobody has to hand count them or anything like that. So,
oh, okay.
Yeah, so we should have preliminary results anyway. I'm sure they'll have to we'll have to canvass the results later.
Scanners, you'd have them in before midnight.
Yeah. So we're dealing with 4 counties, even though we're primarily in Goodhue County.
That's right. I forgot
we have 4 counties, and so I haven't gone through an election here in Kenyon Wanamingo before. I've done it in a lot of other school districts. So this will be interesting to see this firsthand and get a feel for the timing. But I anticipate we'll have preliminary results sometime in the wee hours, and in the morning we'll have those clear, and then we'll go through the process of confirming it with the counties, and the board has a meeting on the 13th to canvass the election and officially announce the results.
You have more than one candidate for that seat?
We have one candidate on the ballot, which is Carla Bauer, who is a long-term school board member. She did fill the appointment the last year, and she also was the one person who filed for candidacy to be on the ballot. And then, of course, there's the write-in, and people can write in any eligible candidate they would like if they have somebody that they think would be a good school board member. And that's an important part of this. That's why we're having the election in the first place, and we absolutely want people to put a little thought into that and vote on that as well when they're in.
Well, thanks, Dr. Pesta. I appreciate it. He's wearing his T-shirt that says "Dream like a night, act like a night" here in the studio, and you can see that if you watch this on YouTube. Tell your friends and neighbors to do so likewise. Thanks. Appreciate your stopping by.
It's a privilege. We appreciate all the support that KDHL and you in particular, Gordy, provide all the activities in the interest of the Kenyon Wanamingo schools.
We enjoy it. You're in tune to KDHL AM, Faribault, Minnesota.